Hello everyone, welcome to Sajabana's channel. So today we're doing something different. In the past, so far with my channel, I've created mostly video game videos because I like games and I like technology and stuff. But today we're going to do some smart home switches. I've already done, God knows how many of these in my house, like 20 smart home switches, just because, I don't know, when it comes to tech and putting in my house, I might show my age with this reference, but I'm a little bit like Tim Taylor, more power. More smart home stuff. So anyways, here's the switches that I'm using. I'm gonna put these in my basement. I'm gonna do a three-way switch, so two switch with an add-on, but with smart switches it's a little different than a normal switch, but it's kind of still the same. So all right, here's the switches I'm using. I'm using the Enbrighten brand. I like Enbrighten and I like Zigbee, so that's kind of what I've gone with. So there's a couple of reasons why I'm going with these. So I like the Zigbee because they have less device limits on Zigbee as far as the mesh network versus Z-Wave. Z-Wave also does a mesh network type transmission for your switches and devices, but with Z-Wave there I believe is a lower limit on the number of hops your devices can make in those mesh networks. Now, and with Zigbee 3.0 or whatever these new switches have, I think the limit is like 150 feet. So really you'd need a real big house to need to go too many hops. But there's interference, things like, especially stuff like concrete walls and metal and appliances. They got magnets and just different things create interference at different times. So I like Zigbee. Zigbee is, I believe, a little bit harder to find sometimes and a little bit more expensive than Z-Wave. But I like the Zigbee technology. I believe it also consumes less power than Z-Wave. But I definitely avoid Wi-Fi smart devices, especially for something like these switches where I want a lot of them in my house. And here's why. Wi-Fi smart switches and devices, if my router blips out for a minute, all my smart stuff is disconnected. Also, all of those devices, if they're on your Wi-Fi, they need IPs, they go into your routing tables, they put strains on your device limits, especially if you're someone who's got an older router or you don't get like a really good access point or router that can handle just many devices simultaneously. Like my old router, I was starting to get to the limits in my last house where it was having trouble keeping track of all the devices attached simultaneously. My new house here, I got a lot of wire drops. You can see here I'm working on it still in my basement. All the wires through my house for every room. I had my builder route them into my basement, and I've got 2 patch panels and a 48 port switch, a small PoE that's not hooked up there, and I've got some shelves and an MVR and stuff to install still. But I try and avoid having my Wi-Fi congested with unnecessary devices. So what I do wired for devices that are just always going to be hooked up that don't need to be portable. And then for like the smart home stuff, I default to Zigbee whenever possible. So anyways, let's get this opened up and look at what's inside. Alright, so I've unboxed the smart dimmer from Enbrighten and I've unboxed the add-on switch. So here's what comes with both of them. One, the switch. So this is the smart dimmer. And for some of these switches, actually, I would have preferred almost to have just a normal paddle switch. And there's a couple preferences here I'll explain. So I like the paddle switches for smart switches, for one, because they don't have toggle positions, right? You just tap up for on, you tap down for off, but the switch isn't flipped into the upper or lower position so that it gets confusing if you look at it if it's on or off. These also have a little blue light, which makes them easy to find in the dark. But the blue light is on when they're off. If you don't want any light, but you want the blue light off, what I suggest I've found works is to set the dimming ability to like 1%, and the lights basically won't even light up, but the little light will go off. Now on the back here, it's pretty basic. In the lower right here, we have our neutral, right? So we're going to run the neutral for the house, for that one. Up here we have the traveler, which we need for the three-way. So if we're going to have two switches control one set of lights, we're going to need the traveler. The screen up here, that's our ground, that's the bare wire. Then up here on the left where we have the black screws, that is your load and your line. And these switches are nice, they auto detect. So it doesn't really matter which one you put in which place. I try and keep it the same as the switch I'm removing just for consistency, but you know, that's the way it goes. So your white wire is going to go in your neutral. Your traveler, which should be red in most cases, will go here if you got a two-way. Your bare or green wire is going to go here in the ground, and then your black and your load line are going to go, the black wires are going to go here on this load line side. Now, some switches, like GFIs, be careful if you get the load line backwards. Some switches, if you get them backwards and plug them in, you won't get a chance to fix it. You'll have to buy a new switch. These, fortunately, are good for that. They detect and they work fine. In the box, you'll also find, which is going to be helpful, there is a little extra paddle switch. I don't need this one because this is like the almond color instead of the white, and I'm going with white. But inside with this is a little like a little neutral wire that you can use. So like just this will come in helpful, because the way my house is wired, the way a lot of these new houses are wired, a standard switch, when you pull out the switch, all that's going to be wired to the switch is going to be the ground and the line load, the black wires. And then if it's a three-way, you'll see the traveler. There'll be no neutral wired to the switch. Now, the neutral will be in the gang box. So in the plastic box behind your drywall, behind the switch, the neutral will be in there. If you have new construction, your house is to code, you live in the USA, that neutral is in there, and it's a white wire. In my house, all these neutrals kind of for each gang box are all kind of wired together, and there's like a wire nut on them to just pull them all together. So what I'm doing is I'm removing the wire nut, putting it back on, adding just one end of this little white wire, and then the other end of the white wire I'm putting into the switch. And that's a lot easier than trying to remove one of the neutral wires from that bundle that's already in the box, trying to figure out which one goes to which breaker to which light. It's a lot simpler, and so far it's worked well for my house. I've done a lot of them. So anyways, we'll look at that. And then here is the other switch. Let me get the other switch out. The add-on switch. So the Enbrighten, if you're going to do a three-way with the Enbrighten, you got to do an add-on. So here is what that switch looks like. Give me 1 second here. All right, here is the add-on switch. So it looks very much the same. You can see it doesn't have, if you look at the very bottom, it doesn't have the QR code, which is what you need to set it up in SmartThings. It doesn't have the little LED indicator, and it also, this little thing here is missing. So, but it still just toggles. You just click up, click down, and it works. Now, these add-ons with Enbrighten, it's the same add-on switch, whether you're doing Z-Wave or Zigbee, it's just an add-on switch. So, because it doesn't actually act as a node in the network, the add-on switch. It just communicates via the traveler. You can see here a lot less goes into it. So on this one, all you need is the traveler and the neutral and the ground. So just 3 wires on this one. So, and which one you're going to put where, I would probably figure that out. You know, match it with whichever one you take out in your house, whichever one you don't. And you can do multiple add-ons. I have one switch for my upstairs hallway light where it's the stairway and the hallway and the upstairs area where all the bedrooms are. And it's got like 1 switch downstairs and like 2 switches upstairs. So it's 3 switches total in the circuit. And I made that a smart switch with 1 Enbrighten smart dimmer and 2 add-ons, and it works perfect. It's fine. And these add-ons, they just automatically detect and communicate with whatever switch they're communicating with. If it's a normal paddle, it operates as a normal paddle. If it's a dimmer, it operates as a dimmer. So these just mimic whatever they're attached to. So that's how that's going to work. Anyways, I don't have any helping hands here, so I'll go and we'll kind of unwire one of these switches. We'll take a look at what's inside. I'll wire it back up and we'll get it working, and I'll show you how this goes. Alright, so I got my first switch out. I just took off the faceplate. It requires a flathead screwdriver. And I took out these screws here on the front to pull out the switch. Takes a Phillips. And then here's the switch. So we can see here inside, we've got our two blacks. So that's our line load. Our red is our traveler, and our bare is our ground. And of course, I found the circuit breaker and checked to make sure the power was off. So I always turn the lights on, go find the right breaker, turn them off, and then verify. I have a voltage checker. You just touch your line and load at the same time to short it out, make sure that the light's not in the off position. And if it's a hot, your voltage meter will light up. So anyways, this one's ready to come out. All right, so here's the second switch in the two-way circuit. So here's the neutral. I pulled it out already. This is where I'm gonna put that little white shunt. I've got two blacks and a red again and a ground. But so what I'm gonna do on this one, because there's no line load on the smart switch for the neutral. So there's just a traveler and a ground and a neutral. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna wire in the traveler, I'm gonna wire in the neutral, and I'm gonna wire in the ground. And then I'm gonna put a wire nut on the line load, which I got a box of these or a thing in the garage. They're cheap, just a bunch of them. Put that on the two blacks, and that will make sure that the circuit is always on for the switches. And the reason for that is the switches are always listening for a signal for the on-off. So basically the traveler and the neutral will provide power to this switch so that it can communicate with the other switch. The other switch has a neutral as well, so that it's always on. That way it has power even when the circuit is open for the light. The circuit is still closed and powered for the switch itself, because the switch itself takes a small draw. But I promise you, probably if you go with a good technology like Zigbee or Z-Wave, you're probably not going to notice it on your power bill, even if you do a bunch of them. But Wi-Fi definitely takes more power than the Zigbee and Z-Wave. So anyways, let me wire this one up and then we'll test them all out. All right, so both the smart switch and the add-on are both installed and they're screwed back in. I got the circuit breaker turned back on, so the circuit breaker is back on, the power's on. So now the last step is you go into your SmartThings app, or your app that you're using to control Zigbee. In this case, I'm using SmartThings with an AOTech hub. Alexa also has a smart home hub, so it'll talk to them. It'll talk to AOTech as well. And you can see here, the blue light means it's trying to communicate. But I just need to go into the SmartThings, say I'm going to add a device, and take a picture of that QR code, and it'll do the rest. So that's it. I'll show you in a moment when they're working. All right, so everything's wired up. The power's back on, the plates are on, and if I press top, the lights are on, bottom lights are off. That's the smart switch. The Enbrighten add-on. If I go down to the main, the primary switch, here's a normal switch for just the general basement lights. Right, that works in the same box. You can see the blue light, so this one's off. It's on. You can see the stairwell light. So this one controls the stairwell since it's a two-way. And again, the light is off because the light is on. Click it and it's off. And the stairway light is off. So I can use this to set up some time limits, like, we don't need these on for hours. So things like that, energy conservation. There's a lot of nice routines you can do. I can also pair them with motion sensors so that if there's been no motion for a certain amount of time, they turn off. But anyways, so that's just the basic high-level overview of how to install Enbrighten Zigbee smart switches with an add-on switch. And I've done a lot of these in my house. They work really well. The timing is good on the app as well. They communicate super fast. There's really no noticeable delay. It's like at the blink of an eye when you turn off a group, or we turn on a group, or even when you adjust the brightness. So just using the switch here around the wall, if I turn it on and hold down, it'll dim the light slowly. You can see now it's getting dimmer. All right, so I can also dim the lights.